Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast, and today I want to talk about how cash flow is the deal. So this is talking about the process behind development finance, how it's not just a loan, like this is a full-blown process management. It's not just a loan, you are managing a process for a good 12 to 18 months in some scenarios. And the reason for doing this podcast is because a few people recently have sort of come to me and said, I didn't realize kind of how in-depth development finance was. I didn't realize how involved it was actually just past when it completed. And this kind of matches in nicely with our Day After Drawdown series, which is a series I've been doing with Ed Clark, who is a very valued client and who has done an incredible job on his current development, which is his pub and 3 new builds. And we've kind of spent a lot of time with him and kind of going through what actually happens after you draw down on your development loan. So what I want to talk about is I kind of want to go through, I guess, the entire process from start to finish. I was hoping this was going to be quite a quick episode, but it might stretch out a little bit. But so the first bit is kind of your build up to drawdown. So this is the process to getting to that drawdown point. And this is talking about things like your QS and interim monitoring surveyor inspections and things like that. So what will happen is when you put your development finance application in, you'll be hit with a few fees straight away. So the first thing is you're going to get hit with the QS fee and the valuation fee. So they are the two professionals that go out straight away to basically verify kind of what's going on. So the valuer's job is purely to go out and value it as it stands now and also to value it once it's complete. So they will give a day one valuation and then they'll give a GDV valuation. They will also give some assumptions on the build costs, but realistically they're kind of not relied on as much as obviously the QS. So the QS will go out, they will then obviously work through your build costs. And this is where a lot of deals tend to kind of pivot is the best word I will use. Because valuations, all right, a lot of us say kind of, oh, valuations always come back as a down val and everything else. But actually, we've found that a lot of valuations have been pretty much spot on. And I think to a certain degree, if your valuation is being down val, you kind of need to look at yourself and think, well, did I have an expectation that it was going to be too high to begin with? So you always need to kind of think that in the back of your mind as well. If you've done your comparables, everything else, then actually your valuation should come back kind of where you expect it to be. The QS is a little bit different because the QS doesn't necessarily go off of evidence, I guess. And what I mean by that is they will always have a thing of, oh, well, it costs someone X amount to build in this area. But the problem is the slight twist you have on it is the QS is working out what the build costs are going to be if someone else built it. So they're not actually sitting there with you and going, well, what's it going to cost you to build it? They don't really care if you've got JCT contracts in place or fixed price contracts or anything like that, because they are a force unto themselves, unfortunately, in that they will look at it and say, well, okay, based on the lender having to build this out, let's say you're at £140 a square foot, which is a horrible way of doing it, putting £1 a square foot on it, but it just makes it a bit easier for this conversation. Let's say you're at £140 a square foot. The QS is probably going to go out and say, well, actually, for the lender to do it, it would cost £160 a square foot because you'd have a main contractor and everything else. So what you need to think as the borrower is obviously the QS is naturally going to come in higher because you might be going in as the contractor yourself, or you might have a contractor who is just a bit cheaper because you have that relationship and everything else. You need to think, well, okay, if the QS is going to base it on me having to go and get a main contractor or the lender having to take over, it is going to be higher. So there's going to be that contingency built in there from the QS. Where we get involved in this is we will kind of try and manage that relationship between you, the QS, the lender. And what we will try and do, and we've done it successfully quite a few times, is let's say the QS comes back at £160 a square foot. Let's say you're £140 a square foot. What we will try and do is try and negotiate between you and the lender to say, well, look, they've got JCTs, they've got fixed price contracts, they've got fixed price for X, Y, and Z subcontractors. And what we would do is say, well, look, can you meet in the middle or can you drop down a bit to meet? And most of the time, lenders will look at it and they'll make a calculated risk of, well, we know it's going to cost £160 a square foot if we have to jump in and deliver it. Based on that, we know you can build it for this amount. We know you've got fixed price contracts, everything else. We've checked out your contractor, looks good, they've got good experience, all this sort of thing. They can then make a calculated sort of assessment of whether they want to move with that. They will have So let's say they agree to all that. They will have a cash flow assumption that you've put together beforehand, where you say, right, okay, based on this build, I know I'm going to need money here. That will then be compared to the QS build cost drawdown. And again, that may change where some of the interest calculations are made as well. So that process with the QS, so moving into drawdown, that is where things will start to pivot. So that's where sort of you build up to your first drawdown, if you like. When we get to the first drawdown, or even the second drawdown, there can be a few reasons why it can stall, or there could be issues or something like that. And these are things you need to be aware of, because you need to jump in and kind of make sure these don't happen. So let's say you've hit drawdown okay, you're through the first part of your development finance. This is the bit where kind of the broker support has maybe tapered off a bit. I mean, we will always stick with you throughout the entire deal, but let's say, again, for whatever reason, you've gone to a lender directly or used a broker that doesn't do that. That broker support has tapered off slightly. You're now in direct communication with the lender. You're now working on each of these drawdowns. What can cause it to stall is if your program has drifted slightly. So, for example, if you were hoping, so you're coming up to a drawdown, you say, well, I was hoping to be able to draw this. The QS is expecting you to draw this. And all of a sudden you're going, well, actually, it's drifted slightly. We're only going to be drawing this. There's again going to be questions. Well, why is it fallen behind? Why are you going slower? What's causing it? I mean, again, we're snow outside at the moment. Things are slowing down all over the country. Things like that, again, it will cause that drawdown to stall slightly. The other thing is missing invoices, missing photos. So again, because if you're in direct contact with the lender, you may not be aware that you need to prepare all of those invoices, lots of photos, all that sort of thing. The QS is going to obviously ask for those as well. If anything's missing, again, that slows things down. If you've got poor cost reporting as well. So for example, if the QS is having to come back to you and say, well, what's this for? What's this for? What's this for? Imagine it almost like an accountant. So for example, with our accountant, we get an email on every Friday saying, what are these transactions? And if for whatever reason you can't present information about what those are, well, they're not going to be able to do anything, are they? And it's the same with the QS. If the QS is coming to you and saying, well, there's 15 transactions, what do these relate to? And there's nothing attached to each one. Well, again, what can they do? So poor cost reporting is a massive, massive issue. And then unrealistic milestone timing, that I wouldn't say that necessarily stalls things, but I think it's worth keeping in mind that QSs will work off milestones. So for example, they will have roof trusses will be X percentage of your drawdown amount. If you haven't hit that, well, they can't pay you on that milestone. So you need to think you need to be hitting certain milestones before each drawdown. So that's not necessarily a stall. That's more actually where drawdowns won't be paid. And then the last bit is kind of getting into that weekly rhythm. So this is, if you're doing your first development, you've obviously got your QS and everything else who can kind of come in and help with this, but you need a weekly kind of thing of, you might say on Monday, right, I'm going to do a site update. And actually, Ed, who I was talking about earlier, who we are doing the Day After Drawdown series with, he is one of the first developers I've ever known who does a weekly update out to everyone. So the lender's in there, the QS is in there, I'm in there, and he does a weekly email out, and it's, right, okay, we've done this is where we've got to. Photos, kind of what's going on site, if there's any issues or anything like that. So he will do that every week. And then what you might say is on Wednesday, right, okay, I'm going to start packaging up the evidence. And then maybe on the Friday, that's when you have kind of the QS check-in. And I think getting into that rhythm really helps with the drawdowns. And I think a lot of people, when they're doing their first development, or if maybe they're inexperienced still within developments, it's very easy to kind of lose track of the QS. And I think all of a sudden they turn up on site on a Friday or once a month or whenever they're coming. And obviously you'll have that kind of done up front, but it's very easy to forget. They turn up on site and you're going, oh God, right, okay, I haven't got this, I haven't got the evidence for this, I haven't got that, I haven't done the photos, I haven't done this, I haven't done that. And it becomes very, very difficult then when the QS is going back to the lender and saying, well, I haven't got anything to kind of present to you. All of a sudden you're sitting there going, well, I need the money. The QS is sitting there going, well, I need the evidence. You're at a bit of an impasse until that evidence comes in, you can get the money, and obviously that causes huge cash flow issues. So that brings us on to kind of the contingency handling side of things, if you like. So we've kind of spoken about how the first part of the process works, kind of spoken about how the QS drawdowns work and kind of how to avoid any issues there. But one of the big things is people don't understand how they can actually draw on their contingency or what the contingency is for. So the QS will kind of go through this with you as well, but the contingency is there for anything unforeseen or any cost overruns. So one of the big things with the contingency is you don't want to spook the lender. And that's kind of one of the biggest things with contingency is all of a sudden, if on your first drawdown you've taken the whole contingency, the lender's going to be sitting there going, should we be worried? Do we need to rethink this? So you have to kind of prep a little bit for this. So the first thing is identify the variance. So kind of what has changed, what has caused the need for this contingency to be drawn on. So it's a case of going, right, we've dug into the ground and we found actually we're going to have to do a different kind of foundation. We found that we're going to have to do something slightly different. So it's going to cost an extra 20 grand. Okay, we know the variance. It's then a thing of showing the mitigation. So it's, okay, we found this issue. Here's the solution. But actually to mitigate that, we've done X, Y, Z. So we've managed to get the cost of this down slightly, or we've managed to, because we've done this, we're not going to have to do this later down the line. So although we're taking a contingency here, actually we're going to save some money later down the line. It's then a thing of showing kind of the updated program. Okay, well, if this has changed, so for example, foundations have changed, there's going to be a 6-week delay on the foundations. This is really extreme. I wouldn't expect this to happen, but there's going to be this delay on the foundations. Right, okay, well, what's the updated program? Okay, we understand the updated program. How do we protect the exit timing? Well, okay, we've had a 6-week delay here, but what we're thinking is if we do this, we'll save 3 weeks later down the line. So actually, we've only got a 3-week delay. And it's about kind of showing, here's the problem, here's the solution, and actually here's how we can sort of protect ourselves moving down the line as well. And that's all lenders really want to see. So a bit of a jumpy around episode, this one. But hopefully that's been helpful in terms of understanding kind of the process of the QS. Because I think from our perspective, we see so many questions about the QS. What's their role? What are they doing? How are they helping me? What do I use them for? What's kind of the benefit of them? So hopefully this has kind of given a bit of context, I guess, to them. And if you've enjoyed it, please like, share, comment, all that good stuff on socials for us. It really does help. But otherwise, catch you on the next one.